At the family dinner, she declared, "My ex will always be part of my life. If you don't like that, don't marry me." Everyone froze, staring at me as if expecting some grand reaction. I just said, "Okay." The words hung in the air, simple and final. By the next week, invitations were quietly cancelled, and it seemed she began to realize that the marriage itself might be over. It all came to a head at a Sunday dinner, one of those tense pre-wedding gatherings where two families, completely different in every way, are forced to act as if they were about to merge for life. My parents, quiet and traditional, married for 40 years, sat on one side of the table. On the other side were Clara's parents, a pair of retired therapists who spoke in a constant flow of pop psychology and treated every boundary as a mere suggestion. And in the middle of it all was Leo. Leo, Clara's ex-boyfriend, or so everyone called him, but according to Clara and her family he was more than that. He was a spiritual brother, a constant, necessary presence in her personal ecosystem. He showed up at every holiday, every birthday, every dinner, and even had a key to her parents' house. He hovered over our relationship like a smug ghost, making inside jokes and insinuating himself into every moment. I had made my feelings about him perfectly clear from the start. I'm not a jealous man, but I believe in boundaries. I believe the past should remain there, not sitting across from me at my dinner table, acting like a permanent fixture in the life I was trying to build with Clara. Every objection I raised was met with the same lecture. Clara and her parents would explain my possessive masculine tendencies and my supposed inability to embrace a more fluid, modern concept of family. They treated my traditional values like a quaint but outdated quirk, something cute but ultimately flawed. I went along, not out of weakness, not out of fear, but because I wanted to see how far she would push it. I wanted to know if the foundation of our relationship was built on rock or sand. Dessert came, and with it the wedding seating chart. My mother, a woman of quiet but unwavering dignity, looked over the draft. "Clara dear," she began, "I see you have Leo seated at the main family table, right next to your aunt. I was just wondering if that's the best place for him. Perhaps one of the friends' tables would be more appropriate." The room seemed to freeze. Clara's mother dropped her fork with a clatter, and Clara herself flushed a deep, angry red. "My mother is just concerned about optics, Clara," I said, stepping in before she could explode. "Having your ex-boyfriend at the family table might send a confusing message to our guests." Clara spun toward me, her eyes flashing with indignation. "A confusing message? The only confusing message here is that you and your parents are still living in the 1950s. Leo is my best friend. He has always been part of my life and he will always be part of it." Her voice carried across the table, and I could see the smug support radiating from her parents. I stayed quiet, letting her and them unravel themselves. Every argument I could have made had been spoken already, and this was her final test. I looked around the table at the shock and restraint in my parents' faces. Then I looked at her, standing there, triumphant in her defiance. I nodded slowly. "Okay." The word barely left my lips, soft but immovable. She repeated it mockingly, assuming I would cave, but I simply stood. "Okay, I won't marry you." No further argument was needed. My parents and I rose from the table, leaving Clara and her stunned family behind, the silence after our departure speaking louder than any words could. He is family. He was a part of my life long before you were, and he will be a part of my life long after. Well, he will always be a part of my life. Her father leaned forward slightly, his voice dripping with condescension. "Ben, we've talked about this. Your rigid definitions of relationships are what cause insecurity. Clara and Leo have a beautiful, evolved connection. You should be celebrating that, not trying to control it." It was a perfectly executed two-on-one attack, with her mother nodding solemnly in agreement. They had been practicing this kind of psychological maneuvering for years, and I could see it clearly, the rehearsed calm, the smug certainty. But this time was different. This time, my parents were watching, quietly observing this woman and her family treat me and our impending marriage with such casual, arrogant disrespect. Clara, emboldened by her parents' support, stood up, hands firmly on her hips, her voice cutting through the tense air. "Let me make this perfectly clear for everyone. My ex will always be a part of my life. He will be at our wedding. He will be at our children's baptisms. He will be at our holidays. That is a non-negotiable fact. If you don't like that, then don't marry me." The room fell silent. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Every eye was on me, expecting me to argue, to plead, to back down like I had so many times before, just to keep the peace. Clara's face held that smug, triumphant look, convinced she had me trapped. I didn't speak for a full minute. I let the weight of the silence stretch. I looked at her, standing there in all her defiant arrogance. I looked at her enabling parents, nodding in approval. Then I turned to my own parents, their faces a mix of shock and quiet dignity. And finally I looked back at her. The long game was over. She had just delivered the final stress test of our relationship, and the structure had failed. I gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Okay," I said. The word was quiet, almost imperceptible, so devoid of emotion that it seemed to confuse her. "Okay," she echoed, mocking as if trying to trap me. "Okay, you'll behave. Okay, you'll stop being a jealous child." "No," I said, standing up from the table. I folded my napkin and placed it carefully on my plate. "Okay, I won't marry you." I turned to my parents. Mom, Dad were leaving. Without another glance at Clara or her stunned, speechless family, the three of us walked out of the house, out of their lives, and finally free of the tension that had shadowed every moment of our relationship. The drive home was silent for the first 10 minutes. My father just drove, eyes fixed on the road, hands gripping the wheel tightly. My mother stared out the window, quiet, watchful. I could feel them waiting, perhaps for a sign of regret, a flicker of heartbreak. But there was none. All I felt was a profound, almost surreal sense of peace. The weight of years of compromise, of silent discomfort, had lifted in that single, quiet word. The weight of a 5-year parade had just been lifted from my shoulders. The relief was almost tangible, a quiet lightness spreading through me after years of compromise and subtle tension. Finally my dad spoke, his voice low and steady. "Are you sure about this, son?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," I said, my tone calm, deliberate. My mother turned from the passenger seat, her eyes reflecting a quiet, fierce pride. There were no tears, just that look of understanding that said everything. "Good," she said. "She was not the one for you. We were just waiting for you to see it." When I got back to my own house, the one I had bought, the one Clara had been living in for the past 2 years, my phone was a war zone. Dozens of missed calls, a flood of texts, everything from furious to confused to pleading. "Clara, what was that? You just walked out? You can't be serious," one text read. "Ben, you have deeply hurt our daughter. You need to come back and apologize immediately," another said from Clara's mother. Leo even chimed in, "Dude, what the hell is your problem? You're blowing this way out of proportion." They all acted as though this was some tantrum, a momentary flare-up that could be smoothed over with a few condescending lectures and a non-apology. They hadn't yet grasped the finality of the word okay. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I made a single phone call. "Cynthia," I said, my voice steady, "it's Ben. There's been a change of plans. The wedding is off, permanently." There was stunned silence on the other end. "What, Ben?" "The invitations are scheduled to be mailed out tomorrow morning." "I need you to stop that immediately," she said. "Do not send out a single invitation," I replied. "As for the rest, begin the cancellation process for all vendors. My fiancée and her family will be your point of contact for all financial matters moving forward. They were handling the payments, so they will need to handle refunds and cancellation fees." It was a crucial part of my strategy. I hadn't paid for the wedding. Her father had made sure everyone knew it. Now the financial burden of unwinding a massive 6-figure event was his problem, not mine. The next morning the shockwave began. Cynthia, professional to her core, started making the calls. The first, of course, went to Clara's parents. I would have paid $1,000 to be a fly on the wall for that conversation. The caterer, the florist, the band, the venue, each call another nail in the coffin of their grand social event. Another massive non-refundable deposit lost. Finally, Clara's father called me directly. His voice was a strangled roar, thick with rage. "What have you done? Do you know how much money we are losing? You can't just do this." "I didn't do anything," I said calmly. "I just accepted your daughter's terms. She gave me an ultimatum: accept her ex-boyfriend as a permanent fixture in our marriage, or don't marry her." I chose the latter. I respected her boundary. The consequences of that choice are now yours to manage. He sputtered and shouted about lawyers, lawsuits, and breach of promise. Breach of promise? I laughed, a cold, empty sound. "You were there, Richard. You heard her. You have a dozen witnesses who heard her deliver an ultimatum at a family dinner. She made the continuation of our marriage conditional, and I simply declined the conditions. There is no lawsuit. There is only the bill for a party you are no longer hosting." He didn't respond for a long moment, and I let the silence settle over us like a verdict. "I didn't do anything," I said, my voice calm. "I just accepted your daughter's terms. She gave me an ultimatum. Accept her ex-boyfriend as a permanent fixture in our marriage or don't marry her." I chose the latter. I respected her boundary. The consequences of that choice are now yours to manage. He started sputtering, his voice rising with frustration. Lawyers, lawsuits, breach of promise, he flailed through it all. Breach of promise? I laughed, a cold, empty sound. You were there, Richard. You heard her. You have a dozen witnesses who heard her deliver an ultimatum at a family dinner. She made the continuation of our marriage conditional, and I simply declined the conditions. There is no lawsuit. There is only the bill for a party you are no longer hosting. I hung up the phone, letting the silence linger for a moment. The next person to appear was Clara herself. She let herself in with her key that afternoon and found me in the living room, surrounded by empty boxes. I was packing her things, methodical, calm. "What are you doing?" she shrieked, her face a mask of disbelief and rage. "I'm helping you move," I said, not even looking up. "You're going to need to find a new place to live. You can't kick me out." "I live here," she snapped, stepping closer. "No, Clara," I said, finally standing to face her. "You've been staying here. This is my house. My name is on the deed, and your invitation has been revoked. I'll be changing the locks tomorrow. I suggest you arrange for your parents to come and pick up your belongings." She finally broke down, her arrogant, confident facade crumbling to reveal the terrified, entitled child underneath. She cried, begged, pleaded. "I didn't mean it," she said between sobs. "It was just a stupid thing to say that I loved you." I just stood there, unmoved. "The time for that, Clara, was when my mother was at your dinner table being treated with disrespect. The time for that was before you made your ex-boyfriend a condition of our marriage. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." The 30 days that followed were a slow, brutal education for Clara in the concept of consequences. She and her family had lived their entire lives in a soft, padded world of second chances and consequence-free choices, cushioned by money and their shared delusion of intellectual superiority. Now reality hit hard. Each day, each call, each small inconvenience reminded them that the world didn't bend around their whims anymore. And through it all, I continued packing, focused, steady. Clara's desperation only underscored what I already knew. I had made the right decision, and nothing she said or did would change it. That world was now gone. Completely erased. The first lesson hit them financially. Her father, after a week of furious threats and bluster, finally seemed to understand that I wasn't going to contribute a single cent to the financial disaster of the cancelled wedding. "I don't understand," he said one evening over the phone, his voice tight with disbelief. "Ben, this is over $90,000 in lost deposits and cancellation fees. How can you just let this happen?" "I didn't do anything," I said calmly. "I simply accepted your daughter's terms. The wedding was conditional on her ex-boyfriend being part of it. I chose not to accept. The consequences are yours to manage." There was a pause on the line, the sound of him swallowing hard, frustrated beyond words. "You can't just wash your hands of this," he finally spat. "There are contracts. There are lawyers. There's only the bill for a party you are no longer hosting," I replied evenly. "That's it. I have no obligation beyond that." The second lesson came socially. Of course they tried to spin the story. "Ben is emotionally unstable. He had a breakdown and called off the wedding for no reason," one of their friends told another. But the story was too good, too juicy. A dozen people had been at that dinner. The tale of Clara's ultimatum and my quiet, final acceptance spread like wildfire. Suddenly, the arrogant fiancée who had overplayed her hand was the one who looked foolish. She wasn't the victim. Clara, after being forced to move out of my house, had to move back in with her parents. I heard from mutual acquaintances that the atmosphere there was toxic. Her parents, facing a massive financial loss and public humiliation, resented her. They argued constantly. The thin veneer of their evolved family dynamic had peeled away to reveal a bitter, dysfunctional reality underneath. Leo, her ex-boyfriend, the man who had been so essential to her life, proved to be less than useless in a real crisis. He had been a fun accessory, a shiny, comfortable addition to her life when she had a stable, successful fiancé. But when she was broke, unemployed, and emotionally volatile, he wasn't interested. Slowly, quietly, he began to distance himself. The constant calls and texts stopped. "I'm busy," he said in a few curt messages. He had other plans. In the end, he was just another fair-weather friend. While her world was burning down, I was quietly rebuilding mine. I took a 2-week trip to Europe, one I had always wanted to take but had postponed because Clara had no interest in it. Standing in the piazzas of Florence, walking along the Seine in Paris, I felt something I hadn't in years: clarity. Fresh air, fresh perspective, a head free of constant tension. When I returned, I threw myself into work. I landed the biggest project of my career, a challenge that demanded everything I had. I reconnected with friends who had drifted away, friends who had never liked the person I became when I was with Clara. I didn't date. I wasn't interested. I savored the peace, the quiet, the freedom of a life that was entirely my own. A life where I didn't have to navigate the emotional minefield of another person's insecurities at every turn. Sitting at my desk one evening reviewing plans for the project, I realized I could breathe again. Truly breathe. For the first time in years, I felt untethered, unburdened, free. About 6 months after the breakup, I received what I considered the final and most satisfying lesson for Clara. A major architectural journal ran a feature on a historic theater I had spent the last 2 years restoring. Holding that publication in my hands, seeing my name in the project celebrated, it was a huge honor, the pinnacle of my career so far. The article mentioned the gala event celebrating the theater's reopening. The mayor attended, along with some of the city's most influential people. There was even a picture of me standing on stage accepting an award for the project. I couldn't help but smile, thinking about how far I had come, independent and unshaken. Final update, it had been just over a year since that Sunday dinner. Life had moved on in ways I could never have imagined. My company had grown, and the success of the theater project opened doors I hadn't even known existed. I sold my old house and bought a beautiful loft downtown, a place entirely mine, all clean lines, exposed brick and industrial steel. I started dating again about 6 months ago. Her name is Sarah. She's a doctor. Brilliant, kind, with a backbone of steel. Her family is wonderful, a loud, loving Italian clan who welcomed me with open arms and way too much pasta. Her past is her past and mine is mine. Together, we're building a future based on mutual respect and clear, honest boundaries. I hadn't seen or spoken to Clara in over a year. She and her entire family were blocked on every platform. But through mutual acquaintances, I heard what had happened. Her parents had been forced to sell their large house and downsize to a condo. The financial hit from the wedding, coupled with her father's other failed ventures, had crippled them. Clara was still living with them. She had tried to launch a career as a life coach, but without my funding for the website and marketing, it had failed to take off. She was working part-time at a high-end boutique, a job she apparently hated. Leo was completely out of the picture. He'd gotten engaged to another woman, and it was made very clear that Clara was no longer part of their modern, fluid family. The final unexpected encounter happened last month. I was at a charity auction with Sarah. We were laughing, bidding on a piece of art, enjoying the night. And then I saw her. Clara was there as a volunteer, wearing a black apron, serving champagne and clearing plates. Her eyes met mine. She saw me with Sarah, laughing, relaxed, happy. She saw me utterly indifferent to her existence. Her face crumpled for just a fraction of a second. The mask of bored resentment she always wore slipped, revealing a flash of pure, unadulterated regret. She turned and disappeared into the kitchen before I could even register the moment fully. I stayed where I was, holding Sarah's hand, feeling the quiet satisfaction of a life reclaimed. No words were needed. The message had been received, loud and clear, without me having to speak a single one. Love this story? Like, share, and subscribe for more epic audio adventures. Stay curious and keep listening.